Arthur Vance was 46 years old. For 20 of those years, he had been a civil engineer specializing in deep foundations, the unseen structures that held up the visible world. For 15 of those years, he had been married to Eleanor. He built their life with the same quiet, methodical precision he used for his projects. A foundation of shared history, load-bearing walls of mutual trust, a roof of future plans. Then, on a Tuesday in April, he discovered the demolition was already underway, planned in secret and executed with unnerving efficiency. What Arthur did next would not be loud. It would not be explosive. It would be a quiet audit of the wreckage, a careful survey of the damage, and a slow, deliberate reconstruction on a new and more solid site. It would cost Eleanor and her new partner everything they thought they had secured. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments, and subscribe for more stories of quiet competence and earned justice. The life Arthur built was one of predictable rhythms. His truck, a charcoal gray Ford F-150 that was 10 years old but looked new, left the driveway every morning at 5:15 a.m. The thermos of black coffee sat in the console, unsweetened. He was on site before the sun, walking the perimeter, checking the rebar cages, the tension of the cables, the moisture content of the soil reports. He spoke little, but when he did, foremen and contractors listened. His authority was not derived from volume, but from a history of being correct. He saw the world in terms of stress, load, and tolerance. He understood that the most catastrophic failures began with the smallest, most invisible fractures. This understanding, however, did not extend to his own home. He had mistaken the surface calm for structural integrity. The house itself was his design, a collaboration with an architect friend from college. It sat on a 2-acre lot north of the city, a clean arrangement of glass, steel, and cedar that deferred to the oak trees around it. He had personally supervised the pouring of its foundation, a monolithic slab reinforced to standards far exceeding the residential code. He believed in over-engineering the parts you could not see. Inside, Eleanor had curated a life of effortless elegance. She was a partner at a boutique marketing firm downtown, a world of product launches, brand narratives, and client dinners. She was the beautiful, dynamic face of their partnership. He was the quiet, steady infrastructure. The division of labor seemed natural, a perfect balance of form and function. She called his predictability his strength. "I never have to wonder where you are, Art," she would say, a hand on his arm, her smile bright. "You're my constant." He took it as a compliment. He did not recognize it as a diagnosis. He did not understand that for her, constancy had curdled into limitation. His quiet was not a source of peace for her. It was an absence she felt compelled to fill. She filled it with noise, with friends, with work, with travel, and, eventually, with someone else. The signs were there, small hairline cracks in the facade. A weekend yoga retreat that left no trace of yoga on her body, only a deep, unbothered exhaustion. A sudden interest in a new genre of music, played on her phone with earbuds firmly in place. A new privacy around her laptop, the screen angled away from him in the evenings. Arthur, a man who could detect a millimeter shift in a concrete curing log, registered these anomalies but classified them as insignificant. He trusted the foundation. It was his greatest miscalculation. He had failed to account for a force of nature he had never modeled, deliberate, patient sabotage from within. The confidence of the antagonist is a specific architectural choice. Eleanor Vance did not see her actions as betrayal. She saw them as a necessary course correction, a project management decision for her own life. She had, in her estimation, outgrown the structure Arthur had built for them. She told her friends, and later her attorney, that he was a good man, but a limited one. His world was concrete and steel, soil reports and stress tests. Hers was one of ideas, of connection, of momentum. She framed her affair not as an infidelity, but as a search for a partner who could operate on her frequency. The man she found, Marcus Thorne, was one of her clients. He ran a tech startup that had secured a second round of funding, a company built on algorithms and user engagement, on things that were scalable and fast. He was everything Arthur was not: articulate, socially fluid, and comfortable with risk. He spoke of disruption and innovation. He wore tailored suits and a watch that cost more than Arthur's truck. In the months leading up to the filing, Eleanor performed normalcy with an unsettling mastery. She hosted dinner parties in the house Arthur had designed. She would stand in the kitchen, a glass of wine in her hand, describing Arthur's latest project, a bridge abutment, a municipal water treatment facility, with a tone of fond, slightly patronizing pride. "He builds the things that let the rest of us live our lives," she would say, and the guests would nod, impressed. Arthur, quiet in the corner, would feel a familiar warmth, mistaking her performance for affection. He did not see that he was no longer her husband. He was a piece of her brand narrative, the steady, reliable man who anchored her dynamic life. A useful character in the story she was telling about herself. Marcus was sometimes at these parties. He would shake Arthur's hand firmly, look him in the eye, and ask intelligent questions about soil mechanics. He was performing, too. They were co-conspirators, confident in their shared understanding of the room, certain they could read everyone in it. They were wrong about one person. They had built their entire plan on a flawed assessment of Arthur Vance, assuming the man who never raised his voice had nothing to say. They mistook his stillness for passivity, his silence for a lack of perception. It was an engineering error of the highest magnitude. They had miscalculated the load-bearing capacity of the man they planned to demolish. The discovery did not come from a shouted phone call or a suspicious text message. It arrived in a manila envelope, tucked inside a quarterly investment statement. It was an invoice from a family law firm, one of the most expensive in the city. The bill was for a 2-hour consultation, dated 6 weeks prior. The line item read, "Asset Discovery and Strategic Planning Session." It was addressed to Eleanor alone, at a post office box she had opened in a neighboring town. The envelope had been delivered to their home by mistake, a simple clerical error by a junior associate at the investment bank who had likely confused the mailing addresses on file. A 1 in a million chance. A stray data point that corrupted the entire model. Arthur stood in his kitchen, the granite countertop cool beneath his hands. The house was silent. Eleanor was at a conference in Chicago. He read the invoice 3 times. The letters were crisp, the language precise. It was a blueprint for a controlled demolition. He did not feel anger, not at first. What he felt was a profound and sudden quiet. The ambient noise of his life, the low hum of assumptions, the steady rhythm of routine, the background frequency of his marriage, all of it ceased. There was only the white noise of the document in his hand. He looked around the kitchen. The Sub-Zero refrigerator, the Wolf range, the custom cabinetry milled from a single walnut tree. He had specified the grade of the steel, the thickness of the stone. He had helped the contractors set the cabinets, ensuring they were perfectly level. He had built this room. He had built this life. And this piece of paper told him it was all just a site, slated for redevelopment. The pressure did not build in his chest as rage. It settled as weight, a vast, crushing tonnage. He sat down at the kitchen table. He placed the invoice in the center, squaring its edges with the lines of the wood grain. He did not call her. He did not text. He did not throw a single object. He simply sat, the engineer presented with undeniable evidence of a catastrophic structural failure. The sun was setting, casting long orange light across the floor. He sat in the dark for a long time. The inventory began. What he knew, the marriage was over. She had been planning its end for at least 6 weeks, likely longer. She had a lawyer. She had a secret post office box. What he did not know, who was the co-conspirator? How deep did the financial planning go? How much of the last year, the last 5 years, had been a performance? The questions were not emotional. They were tactical. He was no longer a husband. He was a project manager on the worst job of his life. The next morning, he woke at 4:30 a.m., his internal clock indifferent to the ruin of his personal life. He made coffee. He stood at the window overlooking the backyard, the oak trees' dark shapes against the pre-dawn sky. The feeling was still there. Not anger, but a deep, seismic stillness. A sense of having been hollowed out. He thought about his work. When a foundation fails, you do not immediately start rebuilding. First, you conduct a forensic analysis. You drill core samples. You run tests. You map the fracture patterns. You understand exactly why it broke before you design the solution. He would apply the same process to his life. He showered, the water hot on his back. He dressed in his work clothes, heavy denim, steel-toed boots. He left the invoice on the table. He drove to his current site, a 50-foot deep excavation for a new hospital wing. He stood at the edge and looked down at the grid of steel and concrete, the skeleton of a thing that would one day hold hundreds of lives. Building was what he knew. Building was what he did. It was the only thing that felt real. Later that day, he made a single phone call. It was to his younger brother, David, an accountant who worked in forensic auditing. The call was short. "I need you to look at something for me," Arthur said. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "It's about my finances." Joint accounts. David did not ask why. He did not ask if everything was okay. He was a Vance. He understood economy of language. "Send me the portal access," David said. "I'll have a preliminary report by Monday. Information transferred." Call concluded. Arthur hung up and turned back to the blueprints spread across the hood of his truck. The work of analysis had begun. For the next 2 weeks, Arthur lived a divided life. Outwardly, nothing changed. He went to work. He came home. When Eleanor returned from her conference, he greeted her with the same quiet nod he always did. He asked about her trip. She was effusive, describing keynote speakers and networking events. She did not notice the change in him, the new watchfulness in his eyes. She saw the same steady, predictable man she had always seen. Her confidence made her blind. She saw the invoice still sitting on the kitchen table on the third day she was back. Her face, for a fraction of a second, registered a flicker of something. Not guilt, but the annoyance of a project manager discovering an unforeseen complication. "Oh, that," she said, her voice casual. "My friend Sarah is going through a terrible divorce. I was just helping her vet some lawyers." The lie was smooth, practiced. A year ago, he would have accepted it without question. Now, he heard the subtle imperfections. The cadence was slightly too fast. The explanation was too complete. It was a patch job on a cracked wall. He simply nodded. "Okay," he said, and he went back to reading his geotechnical survey. He did not confront her. Confrontation was not the goal. Data collection was the goal. Her lie was just another data point. In the evenings, after Eleanor was asleep, Arthur worked. He sat at his desk in the small office he had built for himself, a room of engineering manuals and geological maps. He did not need to hack her accounts. He had legal access to everything they shared. For 15 years, he had paid the bills but never scrutinized the details. Now, he scrutinized them with the focus of a man examining a structural stress test. He downloaded 12 years of credit card statements, bank records, and investment portfolio transactions. He imported everything into a series of linked spreadsheets. He was not looking for a single damning purchase. He was looking for a pattern, a deviation from the baseline. His brother David guided him, pointing him toward the subtle markers of financial infidelity. Small cash withdrawals that broke a long-standing pattern. Restaurant charges in neighborhoods they never visited together. A recurring monthly payment to a service he didn't recognize. Arthur worked backwards, month by month, year by year. He cross-referenced Eleanor's work calendar with the credit card statements. The yoga retreat in Sedona corresponded with a hotel charge for two at a boutique inn. The marketing conference in Austin matched a series of expensive dinners, none of them on the corporate card. A narrative began to emerge from the data, a story of a hidden life running in parallel to their own. The name Marcus Thorne appeared, first as a client, then as a recurring expense. A charge at a men's clothing store. A payment for a golf trip. Small things, easily explained away in isolation, but damning in aggregate. Arthur felt no rage as he entered the data. He felt the cold, dispassionate clarity of a diagnosis. He was charting the progress of a disease. He was mapping the cracks. The confrontation, when it came, was not in their home. It was in a sterile conference room at a mediation firm, a place of neutral colors and uncomfortable chairs. Eleanor had finally served him with the papers 2 months after his discovery. Her petition was a work of fiction, a carefully constructed narrative of a marriage that had died of neglect. It painted him as an emotionally absent workaholic who had secretly siphoned marital assets into personal accounts. The accusation was the most painful part. He, a man whose entire professional life was built on transparency and integrity, was being accused of the one thing he found unforgivable. He had never hidden a single dollar. Eleanor and her lawyer, a man with a confident smile and an expensive suit, sat across the table. They presented their case with theatrical gravity. They spoke of emotional voids and financial disparities. They demanded the house, 70% of their liquid assets, and ongoing spousal support. They were executing their plan. Arthur remained silent through their presentation. His lawyer, a man named Ben Carter whom David had recommended, was as quiet and methodical as Arthur. Ben had reviewed Arthur's spreadsheets. He had seen the timeline, the cross-referenced receipts, the entire forensic history of the affair. When Eleanor's lawyer finished, Ben did not offer a rebuttal. He simply turned to Arthur. "Arthur, do you have a response to these allegations?" Arthur reached into his leather briefcase and removed a single, 1-inch binder. He placed it on the polished surface of the table. He did not slide it across. He placed it. He opened it to the first page. It was a summary timeline. On the left side were key dates from their marriage, anniversaries, vacations, holidays. On the right side were corresponding entries from the financial records, detailing Eleanor's expenditures with Marcus Thorne. Each entry was footnoted, referencing a specific statement in the tabs behind it. He said nothing. He simply turned the page. The next page was a detailed analysis of the alleged hidden assets, showing that every dollar was accounted for within their shared investment portfolio, which Eleanor had full access to and had in fact made withdrawals from. Page after page, he turned. Spreadsheets detailing cash withdrawals cross-referenced with hotel stays. Credit card statements showing purchases for Marcus. A copy of the P.O. Box rental agreement. Eleanor's composure began to fray. The performance of the aggrieved wife faltered. Her lawyer's confident smile tightened. He had not anticipated this level of documentation. He had expected an emotional, disorganized response from a man blindsided. He was facing an engineering report on the collapse of a marriage. Arthur never raised his voice. He never accused. He simply presented the data. When he reached the final page, a summary of assets spent on the affair totaling over $120,000, he closed the binder. He looked at Eleanor. For the first time, he looked directly at her. His face was not angry. It was empty. "The numbers are the numbers," he said. It was the only thing he needed to say. The room was silent. The air had changed. The power dynamic had been irrevocably altered. Eleanor's lawyer cleared his throat. He began to speak of compromise, of finding a reasonable path forward. The negotiation was no longer about a narrative of victimhood. It was about the cold, hard facts cataloged in a 1-inch binder. Arthur had not won. Winning was not the point. The point was the truth. The demolition would proceed, but it would now proceed on his terms, based on an accurate survey of the site. The consequences settled without noise. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. In the end, the law was a blunt instrument. They sold the house he had designed and built. The proceeds were split, but Eleanor's share was reduced by the amount documented in Arthur's binder. He did not fight for the house. A structure that has been compromised is, to an engineer, just a liability. He let it go. He also lost a significant portion of the retirement accounts he had so carefully built over 2 decades. He did not fight for that either. He calculated the amount he would need to live, and he let the rest go. His goal was not to punish her, but to excise her. A clean break. A controlled demolition that left a stable foundation for his own future. He packed his life into 12 cardboard boxes. He walked through the empty house one last time. The rooms echoed. The lines were still beautiful, but it was just a shell. The life it had contained was gone. He closed the door, did not look back, and drove his Ford F-150 to a 2-bedroom apartment he had rented in a nondescript complex closer to the city. His new life was an exercise in reduction. He owned a bed, a table for chairs, his work clothes, and his engineering manuals. His evenings were quiet. He ate simple meals standing at the kitchen counter. He did not drink. He did not seek out friends. He worked. Work was the constant. Work was the thing that made sense. The world of soil mechanics and load calculations was governed by immutable laws. It was a world without deception. He took on a new project, one his old firm had passed on. It was a public works contract to stabilize the foundation of the city's century-old central library. The building was sinking, a slow, imperceptible failure that threatened its structural integrity. It was a difficult, unglamorous job, full of unforeseen complications and tight budgets. It was perfect. For 18 months, Arthur Vance disappeared into the work. He was the first on site, the last to leave. He designed an innovative underpinning system, a complex network of micropiles and hydraulic jacks that would lift the massive stone structure by millimeters, arresting the decay. He was not just saving a building. He was practicing the art of restoration. He started his own small consulting firm, Vance Structural Solutions, operating out of his second bedroom. His reputation for solving impossible problems, quietly and under budget, began to grow. He hired a small team, a young, brilliant geotechnical engineer and a seasoned project manager who had worked with him for years. They did not take on flashy projects. They took on the difficult ones, the ones that required patience and precision. He was rebuilding, from the foundation up. During this time, he heard of Eleanor only intermittently, through mutual acquaintances who did not know the full story. She and Marcus had married quickly. They bought a sleek, modern house in a new development. They traveled. Their life, documented on social media, was a performance of success. Marcus's tech startup was featured in a business magazine. Eleanor's marketing firm landed a major national account. From a distance, they were thriving. Arthur paid it no mind. He was focused on his own blueprints. He was laying a new foundation, one built on his own terms, beholden to no one. His brother David would call every few weeks. The calls were brief, efficient. "How's the library?" David would ask. "Settlement is arrested," Arthur would reply. "We're on schedule." "Good," David would say. "You need anything?" "No, I'm good." It was the truth. For the first time in a long time, he felt stable. The ground beneath his feet was solid. He had less, but what he had was his. The weight in his chest had dissipated, replaced by the familiar, satisfying fatigue of a long day's work. He was no longer the man who had sat in the dark in his beautiful kitchen. He was the man who was saving the library. He was a builder again. The turn did not come with a dramatic revelation. It arrived, as most things in Arthur's life did, as a data point in a routine process. His firm, Vance Structural, had grown steadily. Its success on the library project had led to more contracts, more complex challenges. To handle a specialized aspect of a new project, ground-penetrating radar analysis for a proposed tunnel, they needed to acquire a smaller, niche firm. The acquisition was a strategic move, a simple matter of expanding capability. The deal was finalized on a Wednesday. On Friday, Arthur was reviewing the transitional paperwork, including the employee files for the 10-person team he was absorbing. It was due diligence. He reviewed every name, every role, every salary. And then he saw it. Marcus Thorne. Title, Junior Project Lead. The name sat on the page, black text on white paper. Arthur felt nothing. There was no jolt of anger, no surge of satisfaction. It was merely unexpected information. He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking softly in the quiet of his office. He looked at the file more closely. Marcus Thorne's resume was thin. His tech startup, Arthur now saw from a quick search, had